Hello and welcome to Unit City, the first Ukrainian innovation park. Welcome in Kyiv, where we are based. We also have an office in Kharkiv, and soon we're going to be in Lviv. With soon more than 30,000 people, Unit City is going to be a real innovation platform. I'm very happy to be with you. I'm Dominique Piotet. I'm the CEO of Unit City. And today I'm going to take you in a tour, in a travel. Travel in a few places and travel in time. Why? Because I think we have to learn of other places, especially when we want to understand what an innovative and transformational mindset can help us in terms of crisis. How do we manage a business in crisis? How do we use innovation? How do we use that mindset of innovation, of great innovators in our everyday business? So that's what we are going to talk about, and let's go in this journey. And first, I will take you here. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard about this place, or I've seen pictures of this place. Actually, this is the new headquarters of Apple in Cupertino, California. We are in Silicon Valley. We are in Silicon Valley, where actually the heart and the beat of innovation is taken. Actually, what I find interesting in this place is, well, you see a very futuristic building, but around this building, you see those houses, very modest suburban homes, very classical homes, nothing innovative about them. And this is what's contrasting in Silicon Valley. When people go to Silicon Valley, they think they're going to find a very futuristic building, very futuristic people. But in fact, we see suburbia America. Because innovation is not a place. Because an innovative way of doing things is a mindset, not a place. However, in the way Steve Jobs designed this building, and he was extremely involved in the design of this building. This was one of his ultimate projects. He wanted it to have a very specific form, and that form is actually not very practical. When you want to meet someone who is at the other end of the building, you have to walk all the way around, or you have to cross the garden that is not finished yet in this picture to meet people. And because this is how innovation happens. This is how collaboration happens, is when you meet people, when you collide by chance, by luck, in people you don't expect to meet. That's what actually makes an ecosystem great. It's the quality of the network, it's the number of people you're going to meet. This is why Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley, because you're going to meet tons of people. Now we have to dig a little bit deeper to understand a little bit deeper that mindset, and this is the journey we're going to take right now. And we've been traveling in space, going to Silicon Valley. Now we're going to travel a little bit in time. Before we travel in time, we're going to start traveling in time. We need to travel with money, because I want you to understand that one of the things that is really important in Silicon Valley is the impact those companies have. When we look at this chart, we see that in 2001, the 5 most capitalized companies in the world were from a very different sector. We had General Electric, we had a tech company, Microsoft, but we also had Exxon, oil company, Citi, a bank, Walmart, a retailer. And we're in 2001, yesterday. When you look at almost today, 2018, actually the numbers have not changed that much. You see that the 5 largest companies in terms of capitalization in the world by far are tech companies. And not only they are tech companies, it's Apple, it's Amazon, it's Microsoft, it's Alphabet, which is in fact Google, and it's Facebook. But not only they are tech companies, but they are all companies that are based in the west coast of the US, between San Francisco and Seattle. And this is the third main component of those companies, they are all extremely young. Extremely young company. We've never seen that in the history of economy. So young company being so successful so quickly to the point that they are on the top of their market. How did they do that? Well, they did that because they knew how to deal with crisis. They knew how to surf the wave and to adapt to the crisis because of their specific mindset. The mindset of their founders, the mindset and the culture of those companies that is actually extremely crisis resilient. And I think this will be one of my key messages during this presentation is in terms of crisis, you have to be resilient. This is the most important element in your mindset. So when we look at Silicon Valley, actually, when we try to understand Silicon Valley, we always talk about one thing, startup, because Silicon Valley is a startup building machine. This is what we do in Silicon Valley. We only build startup. We're not interested in anything else than building startup. It's very specific, and actually, it could be very dangerous in terms of crisis. But as you see in this graph, you see how we do this. Because we don't build any type of startup in Silicon Valley. We build one type of startup, monopolies. We build success global tech giant. And actually, the real number that is really interesting is this one, 410. Out of about 40,000 companies, startup companies we have in Silicon Valley, only 410 of them are successful companies who are actually making money and who are self-sustainable. They don't need to raise capital. So why is this interesting for us? Because it shows us that basically to survive in Silicon Valley, you have to deal with crisis. Crisis is the normal Silicon Valley way of doing business. And actually, if you think about it, if you really think about what is an entrepreneur is not someone who deals with an easy daily life of a company that is smoothly running. A real entrepreneur is someone who is dealing with problems, with crisis, who is trying to push the boundaries. This is what they do in Silicon Valley. And when you look at the early stage of those companies, you see a lot of them, more than 15,000 companies. Those companies are going to die. They're not going to make it. They have great ideas, maybe. The next Facebook is here, but most of them are going to die. And everybody knows it. It's part of the game. And actually, at each stage of those companies, as they grow, as some of them survive, as they raise money, well, once again, most of them are going to die. And that's important to understand because that's what happened in tech, of course, but that's also how you create great companies. You create great companies because you know it's a fragile ecosystem. It's a fragile exercise. And in fact, to create those great companies, you need three things. And everybody knows those three things. You're not going to learn anything special when you see those three things. But one of them is extremely hard to get. The first thing is you need talent. Well, of course, you cannot create a big, nice, great company if you don't have talent. And actually, in terms of crisis management, as a manager, you have to deal with those talents. You have to be able to keep those talents with you. You have to accompany them in crisis. We will come back to this. The second thing, which is pretty obvious, is you need money. You need money to grow a company. If it's a tech startup, you need a specific type of money. You need to go get that money to specific type of people who actually are very used to crisis because those people are used to lose their money, their venture capital. They love risk. They invest in a lot of companies, and most of them are not going to survive and are not going to bring them return. So they have that mindset of dealing with loss, dealing with failure, dealing with things that are not going to work, hoping that one thing is going to work and is going to reimburse the globality of the fund. It's a very specific type of mindset. But in many ways, talent and money are easy things to get. You create universities, you hire, you go pitch your company to get money, it's available. When I'm saying it's easy, I'm not saying it's super easy. I'm saying it's relatively easy, it's available. One of the things that is really hard to get is culture. And that's the third component, and this is what we are going to focus on now, because in terms of what happens in terms of crisis and how do you use an innovation mindset, it's because of your culture. And now we're going to travel in time. And now I'm taking you in the 70s. We are right now in San Francisco, 1970. And what happened in San Francisco in 1970? What happened in San Francisco in 1970 is the hippie movement. It's the summer of love. It's that very specific time in the history of the world, but especially of San Francisco, that becomes the magnet for the hippies of the world. And what is the hippie movement? It's a counterculture movement. And that's interesting because, in fact, two things happened in the 70s in San Francisco. You have the hippie movement and you have the invention of the personal computer at the same time, actually by the same people, with the same philosophy. We're going to break things. We're going to do things differently. And actually, when you think about a crisis, this is exactly the mindset you want to have, the mindset of innovators, the mindset of people who are saying, we cannot do things the way they were before. Not only because it's not possible, but because it doesn't exist anymore. There will be after coronavirus crisis, and it will be different than what was here before. We are going to work in different ways. We are going to invent in different ways. We are going to have different needs. Consumption is going to be different. Travel is going to be different. Working together is going to be different. And so if we don't have that culture or that counterculture, that readiness to do things differently, we will not adapt, we will not survive. And I think the tech industry is really teaching us that, especially from San Francisco. This is a very specific moment of the culture of San Francisco. I don't know if you recognize this, but it happens every year. Started also in the 70s in Baker's Beach, a small beach in San Francisco, and then this event moved to Nevada, to Black Rock City, about 5 hours north of San Francisco, in the desert. And it's called Burning Man. And Burning Man is a typical example of counterculture. It's also a typical example of ways of managing, because they're building a city. More than 70,000 people go to the desert for 1 week, building a city, and after 1 week living the desert without any sign of life left behind them. It's actually very exceptional in terms of management. But it's exceptional also in terms of culture, of way of doing things differently. And there's a reason why Silicon Valley loves Burning Man so much. It's because of that idea of counterculture, of radical innovation, of also trusting each other, of new identities. When you arrive at Burning Man, you change your name. You don't use your own name. You take what they call your playa name. There's no money in Burning Man. You cannot exchange money. It's not allowed. There's no logo in Burning Man. So you have to do things differently, organize your community differently. In many ways, this looks like Mad Max, maybe, or the world after, what could happen to us after. And I think, once again, this is something we need to learn from Silicon Valley. We need to learn from those ecosystems where they used to manage crisis, they used to manage change. Because all of this is, how do we embrace change? How do we embrace transformation? And the tech industry actually love change and transformation. We are about change and transformation. We are about using technology to impact the world, to build what we hope will be a better world, what sometimes is horrible, but sometimes could be better, sometimes will save life, sometimes will help us change the way we view society, we view the way we work and live together, and sometimes, hopefully, will maybe even save our planet. We can hope. And all this brings me to a very important point, is to do that, you need great leader. Because change and mindset and innovation is about leadership. And look at those leaders. Well, you know most of them. This guy right here, Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs had a hard time with rules. He was known in Silicon Valley for driving a white Mercedes with no license plate. Everybody knew, even the cops knew, oh, this is Steve Jobs' car, no license plate, the rubble. He hated wearing shoes. He would go in his stores with no shoes. But the guy was a genius, right? Next to him, you will see someone you probably don't know, but who is one of the best philosopher of science, Howard Rheingold. And look how he's dressed. Next to him, you see the third richest man in the world, Mark Zuckerberg. And look what he's wearing at a conference. Do you imagine that guy as the CEO of the fifth richest company in the world? No. The way you usually imagine the CEOs is wearing a suit and tie and being very formal and being very, but that guy is obviously different. He's changing the world. He has a different mindset. Is he more ready for a crisis than any other? Maybe not, but he's trying to do those things with that different mindset. And actually, those tech companies, including Facebook, are companies that are doing extremely well, that are extremely resilient in those times of crisis. And next to him, you have Jack Dorsey. And Jack Dorsey is the founder of Twitter. He's also the founder of a very successful financial company called Square. And as you can see, he has that little nose piercing. And actually, he used to have a bigger one, and he raised his first round of financing for Twitter with that huge nose piercing. And so what you can see is those people are true to themselves. They're not trying to pretend to be other people. They're just who they are. And that's what makes them also great leader, because they're inspiring and people want to follow them. And I think in terms of crisis, this is also an element of mindset we need to learn, is we need leaders that are inspiring. We need leaders who can bring us and we can share their vision and we can understand their mission and we understand where they want to go. And I really want to talk to you about this company, Netflix, because to me, Netflix is one of the companies that is the most inspiring in terms of leadership and management. Netflix has a rule that is very simple. There's no rules. There's no rules in Netflix. No vacation policy, unlimited vacation policy, no real hierarchy, no processes, right? Every manager is the owner of his own department and what is used and what he needs to say and to do. Reed Hastings, the founder of Netflix, evaluate actually a successful day. And a successful day for Reed Hastings is a day where he has to make no decision, which is very counterintuitive. Usually a CEO of a company is a guy who loves to make decisions and he loves to sign paper and documents and decide for the company. Reed Hastings is exactly the opposite. said, no guys, if I had great team, great people, they need to own. They need to be in charge. They need to be responsible. They call that actually at Netflix freedom and responsibilities. And those two actually go together. With freedom goes responsibilities. And this is also what we need to see in terms of crisis. Is how do you manage those crises? Well, maybe you want more freedom because you work from home, but with that freedom will go more responsibilities attached to it. So, what is the world of tomorrow made of in terms of crisis? Well, actually, we have to get used to crisis. We have to get used to it because, unfortunately or fortunately, this is the new normal, and this is why. Because everything is going faster. And this will not slow down. The world will not slow down. The pace of innovation is constantly accelerating. And this is due to many, many things. One of them is the fact that the microchips that we have in our phone are doubling their processing power every 18 months, which means that technology moves forward and is more and more powerful. I will come back to this in a second. But see, it took 8,000 years to pass from the agricultural revolution to the industrial revolution. It took only 9 years to pass from the World Wide Web to the human genome sequenced, which means that technology is accelerating really fast. Actually, technology is accelerating at a 10x or exponential speed. And this is why we have to get used to crisis. Because when you go extremely fast, you have to maneuver extremely fast. You need to have really good reflex, really good intuition. You have to trust other parts of your brain that are just not the rational brain, but also your feelings, your gut feelings, your sensation. Actually, the new managers, the leaders of tomorrow, you've seen the Zuckerbergs or Jack Dorsey, are really people who follow their intuition. Steve Jobs used to say, I'm not asking my customer what they want, because if I ask my customer what they want, they will never tell me they wanted the iPhone or the iPad, because they had no clue it existed. And look, we had the iPad and we're like, how was our life before? How were we doing this before? And so this is also what great managers and leaders are doing. 10x, and actually it actually really shows. Look at this graph. This phone that I have in here has the processing power of the brain of a mouse. This is not a mouse, by the way. This is a phone, but it has the processing power of the brain of a mouse. If we continue this curve, thanks to the evolution of technology, and I'm saying thanks, but maybe we think it's not a great thing. I don't know. This phone will surpass the brain power of human in 2023. In this phone, I will have the brain power of a human in 3 years. Doesn't mean that it replaces a human, doesn't mean that it is a human, but that means that the speed of technology, the way technology is going to help us and support us is evolving exponentially. And then if we continue by 2043, in 20 years from now, in this phone, we will have the brain power of the entire brain population of planet Earth in one phone, right? So crisis is the new normal, and we have to evolve with this. I would like to conclude with this idea that is actually extremely important for me. We are today in a technological world that is highly divided between two poles. I'm going to call it the Western pole, led by the US, and the Asian pole, led by China. And those two poles have very different views of what technology can do for us, how we can use technology to improve our lives. I'm not judging. I'm not saying one is better than the other. Maybe both are bad, actually, and maybe we have to find a third way. But what I'm saying is, if we don't think that we are in crisis, and it's not just a coronavirus crisis, it's also a crisis of meaning. It's a crisis of, why do we need those technology? What for? What type of life do we want for tomorrow? What do we want to do for our planet? How do we want to design this? If we don't ask ourselves those questions, then we're building a world that has no sense and that is led by the new CEOs that you've seen earlier, who will make decisions for us because they can, because they have the power. So what I would like for you to take away from this is, in time of crisis, we need to use our innovation and transformation mindset to constantly adapt. Actually, I will say that this is the new normal. So welcome in the world after COVID-19. Thank you.